Okay, that's what I was waiting for. I'll go ahead and call the order of this hearing of May 23rd, 2024, for Z0489-23-SL, subdivision application for Monroe Park. My name is Joe Turner. I'm the county's hearings officer. I'll start with some brief announcements and a summary of the process that will follow, so everyone understands how you can participate in the hearing. I start by saying I'm not a county employee. I am licensed as an attorney and trained as a planner, and I serve under contract to the Board of Commissioners. I say that so you know you're getting a somewhat independent review of the application before me today. My role as the hearings officer is to conduct public hearings and make decisions about certain land use matters in Clackamas County. In making those decisions, I'm required to apply the county's existing laws. I am not a policymaker. I don't have the authority to vary from or change the laws. If you think that the laws need to be changed, you can work with Board of Commissioners and Planning Commission to do that. But state law requires that this application be judged based on the laws in effect when the application was filed. As a hearings officer, I'm to provide an unbiased decision maker. I believe I am unbiased with regard to the application before me today. I've not had any pre-hearing contact with any of the parties regarding the substance of the application, and I don't have any interest in the subject property or any of the surrounding properties. But anyone has the right to challenge my impartiality, to argue that I'm biased in one way or another, and you can do that when it's your opportunity to testify. Procedure will follow. I'll start by asking staff to summarize their staff report, copies of which are available on the county's website. Then the applicant will have an opportunity to present their proposal and respond to the staff report. We have one attendee now. So if anybody, and then anybody else who wants to testify in support, in opposition, or questions or concerns, anybody who wants to say anything else about this application may do so. Once everyone's had an initial opportunity to testify, I will give staff and the applicant the opportunity to respond to the testimony that was offered. If that response includes any new evidence, I will give everyone a chance to respond to the new evidence. Otherwise, I'll close the public portion of the hearing and announce what I'm going to do. Generally, I will issue a written decision within about 2 weeks after the close of the public record. I'll send my decision to the county. The county will send it to parties of record. So anybody who testifies orally or in writing before the close of the record will receive a copy of my decision when it's issued. Anyone with an interest in this application may offer relevant oral or written testimony, but testimony should be relevant to the applicable approval criteria, which are set out in the staff report. However, it's also important that all parties make their best case to me. My decisions are final for purposes of the county that may be appealed to the Land Use Board of Appeals, or LUBA. However, LUBA generally will not allow new testimony and evidence on appeal. They'll decide any appeal based on the record before me. So if you feel it's important that myself or any future decision maker knows something about this application, you need to make sure it gets into the record before me. In order to preserve your right to appeal, you or someone expressly representing you must testify orally or in writing before the close of the record. And in order to raise an issue on appeal, someone must have raised that issue before me, with enough specificity that people can understand what the issue is. If you feel you need more time to prepare, you can ask me to hold the record open or to continue the hearing. If I hold the record open, you'll have an opportunity to submit additional written testimony and evidence before I make a decision. If I continue the hearing, we can come back and do this again at a later date. But whether the hearing is continued or the record is held open for any other purpose, state law requires that I hold the record open for an additional week after it's closed to the public for the applicant alone to submit a final written argument without any new evidence. The applicant can waive that right if they choose, but if anybody else wants me to hold the record open or to continue the hearing for any other purpose, you must make that request before the close of the hearing today. When you testify, please begin by stating your name and your full mailing address. Please spell your last name so I get it right. And if you represent someone else, please say so. But that concludes my introduction, and then staff will summarize the technical aspects of how you can participate in this online proceeding.
Thank you. This public hearing will be conducted virtually using the Zoom platform. Panelists for today's hearing, which include the hearings officer, county staff, and the applicant, have both audio and video capability. Audience members who have joined the meeting will have their mics muted unless they wish to testify, in which case they will be called upon to do so by the county staff moderator. Audience members' video will not be turned on at any time. Today's hearing is being recorded as required by law. The county will make every effort to post the recording on the county website later today. There is a designated time during the hearing when it will be open for testimony. The hearings officer will make it clear when this is. If you want to provide testimony, you will utilize the raise hand feature. Attendees on PC and iPad, you have a raise hand button on the Zoom bar, which is either top or bottom depending on device. When the moderator switches you over to provide testimony, your screen will look different for a little while. Primarily, you will see all participants' cameras, not just the one who is speaking. Staff will call upon you when it's time for you to provide testimony. Be sure to provide your name and mailing address when you begin. Once you provide your testimony, your mic will be muted and your screen will be returned to normal. If the record is left open at the end of the hearing and you wish to submit additional written testimony, email written testimony to bblessing@clackamas.us or mail it to Clackamas County Planning and Zoning Division, 150 Beaver Creek Road, Oregon City, Oregon, 97045. The staff contact email address is also available on the webpage where you found the Zoom link for today's hearing. Testimony must be received by 4 p.m. on the day the record closes. People who testify and provide their mailing address will receive a copy of the hearings officer's written decision. If you do not wish to testify but would like the decision, you must provide your email or standard mailing address, one by email to the staff contact for the application, or two by entering it in the Zoom chat function during the hearing. Okay, let me bring up my presentation. Okay, so my name is Ben Blessing, Clackamas County Planning and Zoning Division. This is a major subdivision called Monroe Park, and it's file number Z0489-23-SL. So just an overview of the items in the presentation, we'll start with a site and vicinity overview, bring up the aerial and so forth. And then we'll have some information on just the basics for the subdivision layout, kind of some of the main points of this 169 lot townhouse subdivision, followed by Monroe Street improvements and the multi-use path and options 1 and 2 for Alley F, potentially thereon, possible access restrictions. And then we'll do an overview of the townhouse design, and then the subdivision phasing plan, and then some pedestrian connections to Southeast Jack Road and between streets, some private streets. Okay, so just to get oriented, you have the subject property. It's just under 20 acres. It's, for some background, historically engaged in agriculture. It was a nursery known as the Joquita Florist. You can see here, you got several greenhouse structures. Presumably this has been this kind of business, they've been engaged this for many years. So you have a pretty large area here. It's basically, you have Monroe Street going east-west, and you have King Road going east-west, and you have parcels on both sides, really, at least south of King Road. So that's your vicinity. That's just a brief look at the subdivision. Again, it's a townhouse subdivision. We'll go over it in the next slide, but townhouses are now a viable housing option because of middle housing state law. And these are all lots that will have to meet Section 845, but they are townhouse lots. And they also have there's one other lot that's going to be a single family, and that's lot 78. to the north. And again, townhouses on all lots except lot 78. And there again, I believe that's the lot at the northwest sector of that northern extent of the subject property. Okay, so open space tracts will contain steep slopes and water quality resource areas. So tract B, you can see, is primarily designed to capture a fairly steep slope. We'll go over that on the next slide, but there's also going to be some development of the steep slopes, but this will cover much of the steep slope, or at least parts of it. And that's tract B. Water quality resource area, tract D, is an open space that has a pond in there and potentially some associated water quality buffers, regulated by Clackamas Water and Environmental Services, not the ZDO. Open space tracts A and C to contain stormwater facilities, just to orient you with that. Tract A for the northern sector of the development, tract C for the southern. Sidewalks required on one side for private streets. So you'll look at the other plans. It's a little easier to see on other plans, but you do have private streets on several portions of the development. Those will have sidewalks, except for where an alley is proposed. But you'll have sidewalks on one side of the street. And then there's a public loop road. I think it's 3A. That's a typical local road, and it has sidewalks on both sides. So pedestrian connections to Southeast Jack Road and between streets D and E. We'll go over that on close to the final slide, but you have a pedestrian connection and emergency access easement to Southeast Jack. And then again, in this steep slope area, there's going to be a pedestrian connection to the northern sector of the lot, and then the balance to the south, and that'll be a limited amount of disturbance as opposed to a road, which potentially could be more disturbance there. The multi-use path constructed on Monroe, 72nd Avenue and Thompson is in this vicinity, and let's go to the detail. So this is just a snapshot. This is part of a larger capital improvement project known as the Monroe Plan, to have pedestrian and bike facilities installed and connectivity to the surrounding vicinity and bike and pedestrian network ultimately. So you can see here, there's a plan to have a multi-use path running along the south of Monroe Street. Loops or goes south on 72nd Avenue, then continues on to the east. And then there's also a multi-use path to the north that moves along here too. You have a mini roundabout that's going to be for traffic calming, obviously, and you have sidewalks as well. So that's just a brief snapshot of the capital improvement plan. So with that, there's two options that were listed in the staff report for a specific area of the subdivision. That specific area is lots 144 through 155. It's important to note that Southeast 72nd Avenue is a local roadway per County Roadway Functional Classification Map 5-4. And the applicant has proposed direct driveway access points onto this local road. So that is presently permitted in the comprehensive plan in the ZDO. It's not a preferred option because with a multi-use path, having several direct accesses on thereon is again not ideal, potentially not safe. So the county development agency is working with the applicant on potential options, and here in option 2, those lots would have a back alley. Those lots would have, they might have a sidewalk to the multi-use path, but the access will be from an alley and through one shared point onto 72nd Ave. Which is a lower functional classification roadway. So that would be the main access point, thereby limiting accesses on the multi-use path. Again, this is an option. There's pretty good detail in the staff report and in the county engineering comments that document that, the development agency is working with the applicant and that there's some agreements and so forth that need to go on between the applicant and the development agency potentially. But it is recommended that we have both options for conditions of approval on here if approved. A potential access restriction, with this Monroe plan, there is a potential roadway condemnation that could accompany the plan. And with that, the county development agency has indicated that there may be an access restriction put on the west side of Southeast 72nd Avenue. That's not final, that's not been approved. It's just being noted here because it may, if that comes to pass, it may affect the access plan here for phase 3 and 4. And so it's advisory in nature, but it is just something to note. Okay,
It
so
would prevent
townhouse
viability
design.
of both options.
Sorry, potentially, yes, it could affect both
Okay.
options. Yep. So townhouse design, with middle housing, you have an increased amount of density with townhouses, and that's what the applicant applied under that increased density in section 315. And so townhouse options are available. Basically with this plan, the actual facade requirements, the design elements and so forth, those will be reviewed under the building permit. This layout was just to ensure that they can meet the general design and so that those building permits could be accommodated with this layout. And for most of that criteria, it's section 845.03, which is townhouses. That sets forth standards for windows and different kind of roofs and various ways to align the entry of the home, and those are prescriptive standards that'll be reviewed at the building permit. And then there's also access requirements to for access and parking requirements for each townhouse, and there's 3 options. 845.03E1 is for public facing townhouses, for instance, on the loop road here. Then you have private requirements, which are in 845.03E2. And those standards, they're fairly straightforward, and it's mainly ensuring that there's shared access, which there is. And then finally, you have an alley F, which has to comply with the comprehensive plan map for a local cross-section for alleys, which it appears it can. We can certainly have Ken elaborate on that if needed, but it looks like that the subdivision layout will comply with these standards in 845 as designed. So there's also a subdivision phasing plan. It's kind of hard to see, but you have oops, no, that's not phase 1. Just one second here. Phase 1, oh, there we go. Phase 1 is this section highlighted. And phase 2 is this section highlighted. And again, it's 2025 and 2026 for phase 1 and 2, respectively. There's a whole recommended condition on how to implement the phasing plan. So I should note that these are just they look like they're aiming for these dates. It's unknown if they'll actually be developed and or recorded in these dates, but that's what the applicant has listed. Phase 3 and 4 are planned for 2027, and will obviously be the final phases south of Monroe Street. So county staff recommended that the phasing plan be approved based on the standards in section 1105. So there's some pedestrian connections to note. To start, there is a public road, Southeast Jack Road, and if I could just orient you, Jack Road is, if that's Monroe Street, Jack Road is a cul-de-sac that in this sector here, the east property line, and it stubs to the east property line, and there's a pedestrian connection proposed there, as well as an emergency access easement. So what that looks like is you're going to have the conditions call for a minimum width pedestrian paved surface, and there's not going to be direct vehicular access to Southeast Jack Road, which was concern of several surrounding neighbors. There'll be bollards or other emergency gates if for emergency access purposes, but there won't be there won't be daily vehicle traffic through there. So that's just something to note. And that will provide pedestrian connectivity as well. And then finally, again, the steep slope area, there's going to be a pedestrian connection there as well. You can see it here. There'll be stairs because of the steep slope, but there will be connectivity. So the residents of the subdivision and the surrounding area will be able to connect to King Road to the north and further to Monroe to the south. They'll be public, so they're not private. So those that'll ensure some connectivity there with the subdivision. My recommendation is approval subject to the conditions noted in the staff report, and that is all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Blessing. I had just a couple of clarification questions. On page 44, it refers to Linwood Avenue, and I couldn't find that on Google Maps. I'm not sure, just curious where that is.
Page 44.
Yeah, I'm getting there.
I know that there was some other projects on Linwood, but let me just take a look. And
second paragraph on page 44. The Monroe project will be constructing improvements along the primary east-west route between Southeast Linwood Avenue and Southeast 82nd Avenue.
Yeah, Ken, I think that
west.
should be Monroe, correct? Or I'm sorry, let me go to that.
The primary east-west route between Linwood and 82nd, so that implies two north-south roads. 82nd clearly is.
So 44, page 44.
I can just clarify.
Okay.
I can clarify.
Okay.
Linwood is a north-south road that is east of Monroe. So the Monroe project is providing a sort of a connection from Linwood Avenue, which is
It's east of Monroe.
No, it's west. Sorry. So basically you have Linwood
West of
Avenue
this site.
west of the site. And so this
Okay.
project on Monroe itself is essentially providing this pedestrian improvement connectivity from Linwood Avenue east over to 82nd all the way through.
Yeah, that's what I understood. I just couldn't find Linwood.
Okay.
It's not a critical issue. I was just trying to orient myself where that is.
So it's a little farther west.
On page 60, it refers to a zone change, and I think that's an accidental carryover.
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, page 60, the finding says if the requested zone change is approved, applicant shall be subject to R7 and R10, but I'll just delete that.
Yes, thank you.
Page 60. Can we go back to the options for this phase 3? Anyway, on 72nd, 172nd rather, with the alley or the no alley options.
That's option 1.
Is that alley would be proposed only on the northern section of 172nd between Monroe and Thompson? It's not necessary. The southern section of 172nd there's no path there, so that's not an issue.
Yes, I mean it would basically just be from, I think it's lot 44. It's kind of hard to see, and then
144 to 155. Yeah.
And then your question was,
that's what I thought. I
yeah,
wanted to confirm. And it's just the only reason it doesn't continue south is because that planned multi-use path doesn't continue south on 172nd.
Oh, yes, that's correct. Yep.
Okay. And then the frontage improvements. My understanding, the applicant's going to build frontage improvement on King Road, but and the southern section of 172nd south of Thompson, but the county through its Monroe project is going to build the other frontage improvements on Monroe and 172nd. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's the county's dealing, Ken, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the county is constructing just those items on the capital improvement project. I don't know that they're the applicants building those, but maybe you could comment on that, Ken.
The majority of the improvements on Monroe, 72nd are going to be constructed by the development agency project. There is a segment on the north side of Monroe. Basically, I guess it's from the mini roundabout west to 70th, in which we have a condition to construct sidewalk, because the development agency project was constructing multi-use path on one side of the road. It's kind of shifting from different sides of that Monroe corridor, but there wasn't sidewalk planned on the north side. So currently there's a condition requiring that this project at least complete a sidewalk connection on the north side of Monroe between the mini roundabout and
Okay.
70th.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about writing this decision and summarizing who's building what. And I just wanted to clarify. That's what I understood. Thank you. That was the only questions I have for staff.
Okay.
And now it's the applicant's opportunity to testify.
You put on the camera.
Excuse me.
Hey, it worked. Get my water bottle out of the way. Thank you, everyone. My name is Chris Goodell, spelled Goodell, with AKS Engineering and Forestry. Our address is 12965 Southwest Herman Road, Suite 1, Tualatin, Oregon, 97062. Here we are the applicant's consultant for this project called Monroe Park. Wanted to thank you, Mr. Turner, and the county staff, Mr. Bussing, for your time here today. Ben did a super detailed review of the project. I've got a short slideshow presentation. I don't know if I'm going to cover much different ground than Ben did, but we'll see. Are we sharing our screen yet, John?
We are.
Okay, can you put it in slideshow mode, or is that what it is? Because it doesn't look like it to me. It's down there at the very, down over 2 more. That, and that's it. Yep. Perfect. All right, you minimize that. Perfect. All right, cool. So again, this is the Monroe Park subdivision, county file Z0489-23-SL. Here, I'll go ahead and assume command of the keyboard here. So the project team that's been working on this project is, it's called, the applicant's name is Portland Leads Living LLC, headed by Marty Kehoe, AKS Engineering and Forestry. I'm here with John Ragus, the project engineer. Lancaster Mobley provided transportation engineering services. Todd Mobley, Daniel Stumpf, and Ken Kim. Daniel is on the line as well, and he can answer any transportation related issues. And Geo Pacific Engineering is the geotechnical engineer and environmental engineer for this project. And it's not advancing. There we go. Okay, so the property here is shown on the screen. It's a 19.5 acre property bisected by Southeast Monroe. It's consists of 3 tax lots. The tax lots to the 2 tax lots to the north of Monroe Street are in the R7 zoning district, and south of Monroe Street is R10. This is a type 3 land use application for a subdivision, and as the hearings officer and staff know, it's a staff recommended approval with a hearings officer decision. Again, this is just the site, and I don't know why we're on this screen again. Oh,
Sorry.
Okay, so this just shows the property and some surrounding projects and stuff, the school and some churches and whatnot. The project involves 169 lots, consisting of 4 different phases. 168 attached townhomes are included in 1 detached home. There's a couple open space tracks. One's got an existing pond and the other has some topography constrained areas in the northern section of the site. As Ben mentioned, there's a couple of pedestrian connections, one to Jack Road to the east, and then one going up the center of the site connecting to Southeast King Road. And on-site stormwater management is provided in two different stormwater ponds, and one in track D, and I think the other's in track A. This slide is meant to show the surrounding area and the road classifications along with the Monroe project inserted in. So it shows the system of local streets internally as well as alleys and a private street. I guess the connection on King Street was on the west side of the property. We talked a while for having it on the east side of the property, but county staff decided that it was best on the west side of the property. The improvements that go along, the street improvements that go along with the project are the internal streets sort of designed to county local street standard, along with a half street improvement on King Road and the access there. And Monroe Street, Ben did a real good job of describing, both Ben and Ken did a good job of describing the Monroe Street capital improvement project, and we appreciate your questions, Mr. Turner, clarifying that. So as it's consistent with what Ken said, this project is going to be responsible for sidewalk and planter strip on the north side of Monroe Street between 72nd and 70th. And there was also it was also discussed a 3/4 street improvement on Southeast 72nd Avenue. One point of clarification on 72nd Avenue, and I guess I'll just bring that up real quick, is in the staff report, Exhibit 1, page 23 of 68, and it's condition XII. I'm not sure if there's a condition, if there's a number before that, but it says prior to final plat approval, the applicant shall design and construct improvements for the extension of Southeast 72nd Avenue to the Southeast McEachern right-of-way to local standards consistent with standard drawing C110. And then I guess we're not familiar with what Southeast McEachern is. So maybe staff could enlighten us. If it's the south property line, then that sounds good. If it's something different, then we're confused. Next slide, John. Oh, so yeah, so I guess other than the one question we have here where the applicant is in support of the recommendation to the hearings officer, and we'd appreciate approval of the application. I don't know if there's any other parties on the line that want to speak in favor.
There are.
So there are. So then we'll just respond to any comments that are heard during our rebuttal time, please. If you have any questions, we've got the civil engineer and the transportation engineer and myself that all worked on this project for quite some time. So please let us know. Thank you very much.
If I could also just interrupt real quick, Darcy, we've had 3 folks trying to get into the hearing, and the web team, I guess, had to update the link. So I just wanted to make sure that's known. And I sent them the updated web link, but I just want to let you know, Mr. Turner, that maybe you could. So what was the wrong link at first, Darcy, from the web team, and now it's that. Now they put the right one on there. So.
Yes, and I've received several emails while you were speaking from people who are not able to join, but it looks like they're in now.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate the update, Mr. Blessing. I was wondering why there was so few attendees to begin with. But that explains it, and I apologize.
I replied, and sorry, I replied to everyone who emailed me with that the link that you provided, Darcy. So.
Okay. So I appreciate the county's efforts to fix that. Mr. Goodell, the only question I had was clarify the stormwater plan. The stormwater plan says you're going to infiltrate stormwater, but the narrative refers to outfalls in the wetland. I'm assuming that's just for an overflow, but wanted to confirm.
Yes, it is. That's correct. Yes.
The outfalls are just for you're going to infiltrate the majority of the stormwater.
To the extent it does, yes, absolutely.
Okay,
That's the requirement.
Okay, that was the only questions I had. We go to the public testimony. Sean Ingersoll has their hand raised. So if anybody else wants to testify, you can indicate that by clicking on the raise your hand button, and I'll call your name from the list. But Mr. Sean Ingersoll, if there, there we go. Now looks like you're unmuted.
Okay, yes. First off, yes, kind of addressing what Ben spoke to. I know myself and our neighbor were unable to join the meeting. And as a result, I literally I don't know who any of you are. No, I'm not. Is it trying to mute me? Sorry.
No, it's not. Mr. Ingersoll, if you want, I'll just kind of summarize my intro real quick, just so you'll know who's
I do
who
have
and
I
what
do
the
have a
process is.
statement. I do have a statement to give, but yes, if everyone could introduce themselves for the people who were unable to join, that would be great.
Yeah, let me do a quick summary of my intro so you understand the process and everything else. Everybody does. And then I'll have everybody introduce themselves. But my name is Joe Turner. I'm the county's hearings officer. I'm not a county employee. I'm licensed as an attorney and trained as a planner, and I serve under contract with the Board of Commissioners. So you know you're getting a somewhat independent review of the application before me. My role as the hearings officer is to conduct the hearing and make decisions about certain land use in Clackamas County. I have to apply the county's existing laws. If you think that the laws need to be changed, you can work with Board of Commissioners and Planning Commission to do that. But state law requires that this application be judged based on the laws in effect when the application was filed. As a hearings officer, I'm to provide an unbiased decision maker. I believe I am unbiased with regard to this application. I haven't had any pre-hearing contact with any of the parties regarding the substance of the application, and I don't have any interest in the subject property or any of the surrounding properties. But anyone has the right to challenge my impartiality, to argue that I'm biased in one way or another, and you could do that when it's your opportunity to testify. Skip that part. Anyone with an interest in the application may offer relevant oral or written testimony, but testimony should be relevant to the approval criteria, which are set out in the staff report. Also, it's important that all parties make their best case to me. My decisions are final for purposes of the county, but may be appealed to the Land Use Board of Appeals, or LUBA. But LUBA generally will not allow new testimony and evidence on appeal. They'll decide any appeal based on the record before me. So if you feel it's important that myself or any future decision maker knows something about this application, you need to make sure it gets into the record before me. In order to raise an issue on appeal, in order to preserve your right to appeal, you or someone expressly representing you must testify orally or in writing before the close of the record. And in order to raise an issue on appeal, someone must have raised that issue before me with enough specificity that people can understand what that issue is. If anyone feels they need more time to prepare, you can ask me to hold the record open or continue the hearing. If I hold the record open, you'll have the opportunity to submit additional written testimony and evidence before I make a decision. If I continue the hearing, we can come back and do this again at a later date. But whether or not the hearing is continued or the record is held open for any other purpose, state law requires that I hold the record open for an additional week for the applicant alone to submit a final written argument without any new evidence. If anybody else wants me to hold the record open or continue the hearing for another purpose, you must make that request before the close of the hearing today. Given the technical issue that we were just discussing, I'm going to hold the record open for a week in this case to make sure everybody has an adequate opportunity to testify, at least in writing. Hopefully everybody who wanted to testify was able to use that new link and join the hearing. But just in case, I'm going to hold the record open for at least a week for public testimony. If anybody wants me to hold it open for a longer period, you can make that request and I'll consider it. Sorry, threw me off with my usual spiel when I did that. My decision must comply with state law that requires that I issue a final written decision within 120 days after the application was filed. So there's some limit to how long I can continue the hearing or hold the record open. When you testify, please begin by stating your name and your full mailing address. Please spell your last name so I get it right. And if you represent someone else, please say so. Also, please don't repeat testimony offered by yourself or earlier witnesses. Repeating your testimony doesn't make your case any stronger. The only issue for me is whether the application does or does not comply with the approval criteria. I think that's the summary of my intro. Mr. Ingersoll, go ahead. If you haven't done so already, please give us your mailing address too, so we can make sure
Yes.
you receive a copy of my decision.
Quick question. I know Chris Goodall was able to be on camera. Are
Oh, yes.
other participants able to?
Can everybody introduce themselves as well?
Ye-
And no, according to staff.
Okay. All right. I just had my son here, so I thought it could be a good opportunity for him. Yes. So name, mailing address, spell last name. My name is Sean Ingersoll. I live at 6905 Southeast Jack Road, Milwaukee, Oregon 97222. My last name is Ingersoll.
Thank you, Mr. Ingersoll. Yours appears on my screen. Not everybody has their last name, but I appreciate the spelling.
Yes. Okay. So yeah, I had written some testimony, so I'll go ahead and start that.
Okay.
My name is Sean Ingersoll. I live on Jack Road, just a couple houses away from the Coita properties. The Coita family has been an integral part of this community for over 115 years, with William Coita taking over as Uncle Joe's nursery back in 1933. When my family moved to the neighborhood in 2015, my dad recounted how he used to walk to Lot Whitcomb Elementary School with one of the Coitas when they were both boys. It was always fun to see the nursery bustling at different times each year. While I am sad to see the Coita's nursery time come to an end, I do believe in their right to develop the land that has been under their stewardship for so long. In reviewing the proposal that has been put forward by the Portland Leads Living LLC, I do have real concerns that its approval would be detrimental to this amazing neighborhood we have all shared with the Coita family. Keith, in my opinion, keys to thoughtful and respectful development. Development that supports wildlife corridors and habitats, especially in the light of the ever decreasing biodiversity. Our area is home to a wide array of wildlife. From our property alone, I have seen bald eagles, great horned owls, red-tailed hawks, coyotes, Oregon swallowtail butterfly, and an elusive deer or two. Turkey vultures also come through the area each year. Development that supports heat and pollution reduction through the use of native plants and vegetation, while also minimizing impervious surfaces and restoring land to its natural state. In this particular case, it was once a wetland. Development that protects and respects the existing character of the neighborhood. This neighborhood is primarily low-density, single-family homes. Development that will be supported by the existing infrastructure, including but not limited to utilities and roadways. The intersection of Monroe and Linwood Avenue was recently modified to address the high rate of traffic collisions that were occurring. Instead of installing a four-way traffic control, the city of Milwaukee's solution was to prevent crossing Linwood altogether. This poor planning has resulted in traffic snaking through surrounding neighborhoods, often at high speeds, where families with children live, play, walk, and bike. To add high-density housing on Monroe will only exacerbate this issue. In closing, the proposal as it stands does not appear to support any of my aforementioned points. There are also a number of nearby in progress or completed high-density housing in sites that are much more appropriate for that type of development. This includes the Murphy site, the Hillside site, Coho Point, Kellogg Bowling Alley, 7 Acres Apartments, and Bonaventure Senior Housing. With just these 6 sites alone, there are over 1,400 new units. I believe low-density housing developments still have an important place in growing cities. It provides young families the place to play, wildlife the space to be, and helps to reduce extreme heat and pollution through increased native plants and vegetation. I believe that the proposal as it currently stands by the Portland Leads Living LLC misses the mark in more ways than one. I strongly urge decision makers to return and Portland Leads Living back to the drawing board to formulate and present a development proposal that feels at home in our beautiful neighborhood, aligns with what our infrastructure can handle, and supports our diverse wildlife while promoting the reduction of heat and pollution. That is all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ingersoll. Some of your points about heat and pollution are policy issues that have to be addressed by the Board of Commissioners. I have to review this site based on the current standards, which allow the zone R7 and R10, but with recent changes to state law, townhomes are allowed in all residential zones. So I can't deny this application because of if it meets all the approval criteria in the county code, I would have to approve it, even given the concerns you've raised. But the issue is whether it meets the approval criteria in the county code.
So that's a good point, Joe. Quick question. Sorry, there's an airplane. Quick question about so the zone, it's currently zoned for low density. We are
Yes.
also an unincorporated part of Milwaukee.
Mhm.
How, as just a resident, how is something like this approved or denied when it already, if the area is zoned for low density, and this plan is not low density, who makes that decision to change the current designation?
The Board of Commissioners, but in this case, recent changes to state law that require all local governments, cities, counties to allow duplexes, quadplexes, and townhomes in all residential zones. It was a significant change, but it was a state law change, and the county has to implement that.
Okay, and then I guess the follow-up question would be, what weight do local residents have in kind of your decision moving forward? Is what I said, and I'm sure others will say, is that accounted for, or does it not really matter?
If it addresses the approval criteria, like as I kind of said in my intro, it's not a popularity contest. Whether everybody loves it or everybody hates it isn't an issue I get to consider. The only issue I get to consider is whether it does or does not comply with the approval criteria. So the objections, we don't like density, this totally understandable, is not something I get to consider. If it doesn't meet the density that they have proposed does not meet the current code state requirements, that's something I have to consider. And I would, if it was shown that it doesn't meet those, I would have to deny this application.
Okay. Thank you.
So I would say it's not so much weight of testimony, it's weight of evidence, whether or not the criteria are met. Thank you, Mr. Ingersoll. If you want to go ahead and mute yourself, thank you. And Kathleen, I don't have a last name. Has her hand raised.
Hello, am I unmuted now?
Yep, you are. Thank you.
Thank you. My last name is McNeil, McNeal, and I live at 6900 Southeast Queen Road, the back of my beautiful yard.
I'm sorry, Queen Road, Queen.
Queen, yeah, King,
Okay.
Queen, Jack.
Okay, great. Just I didn't notice that. Thank you.
Please do. It's a beautiful neighborhood. Mr. Ingersoll is my wonderful neighbor. And yes, I really want to just reiterate what he said. It was very disconcerting not being able to get into this meeting, especially when we had all planned. There has been discussion, excuse me, amongst our neighbors. We do have a pretty tight-knit community that I'm proud to be associated with. So I have emailed over a request for a recording of this meeting. I would like to get that so that I can share that with the neighbors. My other request is, once we joined the meeting, and again, I also don't know Darcy, Ben, or Ken. Sorry, using first names. Feel like we're friends here. Assuming that you're with the county, and you're discussing something where you're referring to page 44. Is this document going to be made available to the public? I've not seen this document, and I would hope someone could maybe email me a link to that.
Okay, I'll answer your questions real quick. The
Thank you.
county will put the recording of the hearing on its website after the hearing, probably this afternoon. Mr. Blessing can give you more specific about how to access that. Ms. Renard is the staff for the county. She sets us up with this Zoom meeting, et cetera. Mr. Blessing is the county planner, so he's the person who wrote the staff report is the document that was being referred to, page 44. That is available from the county, and I'm sure Mr. Blessing can send it to you via email as well. But it is the staff's summary of the applicable approval criteria for this development and the staff's opinion of whether or not those criteria are met. Chris Goodell is the applicant's representative, and Ken Kent is the county transportation engineer. Is that right, Mr. Kent? Okay, so Mr. Kent, Mr. Blessing, and Ms. Renard are all county staff. Mr. Goodell is the applicant's representative. As I said, I'm the hearings officer, so I'm going to make the decision for this case.
Fantastic. Thank you for just making that clear. I was frantically searching for a way to get into this meeting, and I think I even sent Darcy Renhard an email. So I understand how the planning goes. I know that the state has created these rules to combat the houselessness, and they're just infilling everywhere. And I think that in the next couple of legislature meetings, transportation is going to be a big focus. And so, Mr. Kent, I would really like to hear from you. What is going to happen to the roads around this development? Currently, 70th Avenue is it's used for local commuters and drag racers. It was a pothole desert land up until about 7 years ago. Once they paved it, now it takes on a lot of traffic, and I can't even imagine more traffic coming through with this development. I heard in the meeting that the county was recommending that the homeowners of this Monroe development use 70th rather than 72nd. What type of improvements are going to be made to this road? And also Monroe, I want to harken back to what Sean Ingersoll was stating about that intersection of Monroe and Linwood. It is a mess. Can you share some information about how the transportation arteries are going to be improved specifically for 70th?
I will ask staff to respond after everybody's had the chance to testify, but in the intro, staff, there's a county project for Monroe something project. County has a capital improvement project, which you may be aware of, that they're going to improve Monroe and 72nd between Monroe and Thompson, and then it looks like they're improving Thompson as well. So that's kind of occurring at the same time as this development.
So you mentioned that was stated in the intro, but we weren't part of the intro. Where can I get information about that?
I just wanted to give you that background, and then I'll ask them to reiterate what the project is. I just wanted to give you a quick summary, and then once everybody's had the chance to testify, I'll give staff and the applicant as well an opportunity to respond, and they can provide more detail.
Thank you. So after the testimony, I would very much appreciate information about the transportation infrastructure. Again, Linwood, Monroe, continuing Monroe all the way up to where it connects with Thompson, and very specifically 70th Avenue, and also addressing why the county would recommend that traffic be diverted to 70th rather than 72nd. And if I may add one more item for my question, the merging of 70th to King Road is a dangerous intersection. I'm sure you are part of the county. You should know about the traffic issues up there. Folks hitting poles, folks driving through backyards. It is a blind corner. It just doesn't appear to me that that would be the recommended access for high density traffic. So if you could address those questions, I would appreciate it. And I will mute myself and say thank you very much for your time. And
Thank
thanks
you,
for
Ms.
getting
McGinn.
the corrected link. Much appreciated.
Thank you. Kyle Linman. Oops.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can, thank you.
Hi, I'm Kyle Linneman. I live at 10655 Southeast 74th Avenue. And yeah, apologies, I joined the meeting late, so I didn't get the full rundown on testimony etiquette, but I guess the concern that I wanted to bring up is that on the east side of the development, there is going to be pedestrian access to Jack Road, which is currently just a cul-de-sac or
Mhm.
dead end. And presumably it wasn't clear from my reading of what I was able to find online, because if there was going to be on-street parking within the new development. So I'm presuming that Jack Road that will become a parking lot for guests and visitors. And my concern between that and folks wanting to access King Road by going on Monroe and up 74th is going to increase traffic on 74th Avenue. And currently 74th Avenue does not have sidewalks and is already dangerous to walk on because it's the only access for the development on 75th Avenue. And I didn't see anything when I was looking through the plans about traffic studies around 74th Avenue. So I had questions about whether it was considered related to all of this proposed project, or if there's any plans to handle that, because I don't want my child or dog to get hit by a car, which is already kind of scary with the amount of traffic that's on the street already.
I will note there is a traffic study in the record, Exhibit 2A. I, off the top of my head, I don't know if it addressed 74th, but I'm sure the applicant can address that and let us clarify that. And the other issues that you've raised. As far as the lack of sidewalk on Monroe, no, you're 74th, is that? Well, as noted, the county has a capital improvement project for the area, which will improve Monroe 72nd and Thompson with sidewalks on both sides and other improvements, and widening and a multi-use trail, I think is what the plan is, but I'll ask staff to, since the public wasn't able to get on, I'll ask staff to reiterate that, the specifics of that when they get to testify.
Yeah, and that doesn't include 74th.
Yeah.
And right now, if you are at Lot Whitcomb, there's a school crossing, zebra stripes to go to 74th Avenue that just dead end into somebody's yard, which is not, in my opinion, a safe route to school, but that's a separate issue than all of this.
Thank you, Mr. Lindeman. Unless you had anything to add, I'll ask. There we go. I was going to ask you to mute yourself. I have Chelsea. I don't have a last name. Looks like you're muted. You'll need to unmute. There we go.
Yes. Hi, my name is Chelsea Avila, and I live at 7318 Southeast Jack Road in that cul-de-sac that we are opening up.
Miss Avila, can you spell your last name so I get it right?
Yes, it's A-V like Victor, I-L-A. And
okay, just one L.
Yes.
Thank you. That's why I asked.
Yeah, it's kind of confusing. So I have several concerns. My main concern is privacy. My backyard inside house opens up to the new development, and their backyards and back of their houses are all going to be looking into my yard. And I want to know, what are we going to be doing for privacy for this whole side where it opens up and everybody is going to be peering into our houses? Also, with them opening up this breezeway for people to walk in and out of, we already have so many cars parking down our side of Jack Road from the other townhouses that I don't even have room to park my truck half the time or turn in and out of my road. And yes, to children getting hit trying to cross Jack Road, my son has almost been hit going to his bus stop several times. And so to open this up to more vehicles or people or anything is quite scary for me and my kids traveling to the bus stops. It's just like privacy, our space. I don't understand why we're opening this side of it up when there's so much on the other side. And so I would like to know, like, what are we doing for privacy, for respect for this chain link fence for us? I mean, I'm going to have 7, I think I counted it was 6 townhouses backing up to this chain link fence on my privacy. 6. And they're all going to be peering into my yard.
Thank you, Ms. Avila. Sorry, I had a response to one of your questions. Let me look real quick. Actually, I don't have a response. I'll leave that to the staff.
Okay.
But just so everybody's aware that access to Jack Road is also proposed as an emergency access. So there will be removable bollards in there. So
Yes.
air truck could get through if it needed to, but it's mostly for, it will not allow for public vehicle traffic, but I understand the concern that people will park on Jack Road.
Yes,
and,
because we do have that
access
from
that.
the other townhouses. They all park their vehicles on our street and then walk across. So we, as there's only 5 houses on Jack Road, and we don't even have room for our vehicles to park. We have to go and ask them, hey, can you please move your vehicles so that we can park? We don't have room for even our guests to park on Jack Road. We have to stop them and say, can you please not block our houses so we can park on Jack Road in front of our homes?
I understand. Thank you, Ms. Avila. Is there anybody else who'd like to testify who's not had the opportunity to do so? Katie O's phone, iPhone.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, my name is, sorry, my cell phone. My name is Katrina Otnes, O-T-N-E-S, and I live on 10890 Southeast 72nd Avenue,
Okay.
and my last name is O-T-N-E-S. Okay, I guess my questions are, we are currently getting ready to undergo a major road maintenance or overhaul. We're getting sidewalks and they're going to do a turnaround at the end of 72nd. And if all these new townhomes are coming in across the street from me, I guess logistically, the road is not set up for that much traffic. You know, it's all of our lots are close to 1/3 of an acre apiece practically. And the joy of moving here was the privacy and the quietness of the area and right next to the school. And if we have, 1,000 people moving in, where are these kids going to go to school? We don't have logistically. I just don't understand how traffic would even work. We had to put the sidewalks in, and I was so excited for the curbs to prevent the street racers in the middle of the night and the people going through the people's yards. And we're going to have curbs, which will be great. But with all this other traffic, this road, 72nd to Monroe, is just not set up logistically to handle that many more people and traffic in general. I just, yeah, that would be my question. How is that going to work necessarily? How tall are these townhomes going to be? That's my other question, because everybody that mainly lives here is a ranch style home. And mainly just voice my, I know you don't care about popularity contest of whether people like it, but I just wanted to voice my concern as a neighbor of nobody is happy about this, and we're all pretty upset. We moved here for the quiet and the privacy, and now it's, going to be gone.
I
So
understand that concern, but it's not something I can address, but
I know,
will
but I would like
consider
to
and
voice
address
it.
the issues you have
Yeah.
raised.
Yes. But yes, that is my concern. Where are all these people going to go to school? Because we have one school and
Mhm.
it's already overpopulated. And logistically, how is it going to be able to handle this much more traffic? All these lots are so big and it's low
understand.
density housing. But yes, those are my concerns, and thank you for listening, I guess.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else who'd like to testify who hasn't had the opportunity to do so? Just waiting to make sure everybody can find the raise your hand button. Okay, I'm not seeing anything. Mr. Blessing, do you have staff response?
Excuse me,
Or-
Mr. Turner, we do have another hand up.
Oh, there we go. As soon as I looked away, it went up. Mr. Spencer, Tom Spencer.
Hi, thank you. Sorry, I've just managed to join about 5 minutes
Not a
ago,
problem.
so I apologize if I've missed anything, if I'm repeating any questions. And part of this for me is the communication in the process. I'd found out about
Mr.
this.
Spencer, but first, can you start by giving us your name and your mailing address?
Yeah, sorry, it's Tom Spencer, 6850 Southeast Queen Road.
Okay. And because you missed I understand why. A lot of people missed the beginning, but I am going to hold the record open after this hearing so people can submit additional written testimony as well because of the technical issue we had this morning. But go ahead, Mr. Spencer, you're here. I'll let you give your testimony.
Thank you. Yeah, I think for me, I'm getting up to speed quickly here because I just found out about this from a neighbor. I'm a little concerned about the communication process and the community input process. Or
And Mr. Spencer, did you give us your address?
yes,
Okay, sorry. I didn't. Staff wrote it down. That's what matters because they'll be the ones sending out my decision. I just wanted to make sure we got it. Go ahead, Mr. Spencer.
so yeah, I've just found out about this morning, and
I understand.
I live within hundreds of feet of the proposed development, and I don't know where I got missed in communication, and
Well, the county sends notice to the owners of property within 300 feet of the site, so you may be just beyond the notice boundary.
okay. All right, I think I'll probably submit some additional feedback in writing because, in my opinion, 300 feet is, not a sufficient perimeter. Yeah, I think I have the same questions as everybody else about traffic and parking and how this is affecting the surrounding neighborhoods, and with very little previous input and basically creating another heat island in the middle of the neighborhood here. At least if there was some idea of some natural space rehabilitation being part of this process or the development, and not just a big block of apartment houses in the middle of the neighborhood. So that's what I've got off the top of my head, and I'll have to think some more and submit some additional follow-up. But thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Spencer. One more time, anybody? Grace L. You're muted. You'll need to unmute yourself. There we go.
Hi, I guess my concern.
Can I get your name and address first, please?
Sorry, it's Grace Levin, 7299 Southeast Thompson Road.
And how do you spell your last name?
Lovan.
Thank you.
Sure. I've noticed there's not a lot of police coverage in the neighborhood, and it's not something that's necessarily needed all the time right now. Do you know if that would be addressed if we were to increase the population by this much?
That's something that I'll let staff address.
Thank you.
Does anybody else want to say anything about this application? And Ms. Lovin, can you, oh, you did it, never mind. I could rate, lower your hand. Okay, not seeing anybody. Mr. Blessing?
Hey,
Yeah.
if it appropriate, could I bring up the site plan to kind of go?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Since everybody missed your initial summary, the public did, I think that's very appropriate.
Okay, so this is the subdivision layout. I'll try to cover all the questions about the technical aspects of this. And then some of the other questions that may not be related to ZDO criteria. But starting with Grace. So yeah, police coverage is not an approval criteria in the zoning and development ordinance. And that also goes for, there was a question about the school capacity for, I think it's NCPRD is the district. They were notified of this application, but there was no comments. Moreover, there's no real approval criteria for school districts for capacity in that regard. So for Mr. Spencer, for Tom Spencer, yeah, I do note that it looks like your parcel is just beyond the radius. I'll make sure that my email address and the other way to contact the planning department is in the record here, so you all can hear it, you know, and you could make comments to me, because I think you said you wanted to submit some testimony, which is great. Yeah, the natural space aspect, I will note that the applicant is preserving a pond as well as some associated uplands with the pond. And those will be preserved basically in this sector. So just noting that. So for Ms. Katrina Owens, sorry if I mispronounced that. So the height of the townhouses will be basically subject to section 845 and 315. Usually there's no more than 35 feet of height. In the zoning district, most townhouses are 1.5 to 2 stories and they don't exceed that. But to ultimately answer your question, that'll be at the building permit stage, but all the standards are in section 315 and 845. So you're typically going to be well under 35 feet, I would assume, and the applicant can obviously speak to that if they need to. So Miss Avila, and I believe we spoke privacy and the fencing and everything like that. That again, completely understand that it's not an approval criteria, but I again think the applicant could potentially address that and kind of confirm if there's going to be a fence with this development or not. But that's the developer that'll have that's their choice ultimately. Yeah, and then generally the access way, that's the connection between Jack Road and the new proposed public street. Just noting that it Mr. Turner mentioned it, but just noting that it's not going to have full vehicular access. It's going to be a pedestrian connection only, and then in the times of emergency, they'll be able to go through there, but it's not a full vehicular connection. Mr. Lindman also had question about the pedestrian access. And yeah, I think maybe 74th, if I recall. So just and Ken Kent with county engineer can talk more about this, but the improvements for frontage on Monroe Street will kind of coincide with the county development agency, who's, you know, doing the big multi-use path from Monroe onto Thompson, or sorry, on through Monroe and down to Thompson like this. So there won't be any improvements beyond the development, beyond the subject property, except for where that county capital project is. 74th as far as I know, Ken can correct me, there's no capital projects to improve this with sidewalks or anything like that, and there's no requirement for the applicant to do so at this time. So, Ms. McNeil, yes, so you had some specific questions, so requests for recording, link to staff report and so forth. So yes, the recording, will make every effort to have the recording up on the county website this afternoon. The staff report that we're referencing here is available online. It's basically in the county citizen access page. If you're having trouble getting that, I could potentially send you the the PDF, or I can send you a how-to guide on how to access those documents from our website if you're having trouble. I'll say it again, probably if Mr. Turner allows it, but my email address is bblessing@clackamas.us. I'll also give you my phone number, 503-742-4521.
Thank you, Mr. Blessing. I appreciate that.
Yep. And then, okay, on 70th, and I might lean on Ken Kent with County Engineering here, but my understanding is Southeast 70th, there, unless the capital improvement plan calls for upgrades, I don't think there's going to be any diverted traffic onto Southeast 70th. I believe the traffic's going to continue to flow as is, and there's just going to be some major improvements to that road. I mean, again, the 74th is connected, and I'm 70th is connected, right? Ken, is there a capital improvement project on that? If I could.
No, not that I believe.
Okay.
I think there were some recent sidewalk improvements on that road, but there's not an additional improvement, or it's not related to this Monroe project on 70th itself.
And it's not being diverted in any way.
I'm not aware of that as far as a preference. I mean, it does have a designation of a connector, which is a roadway that's maybe somewhat more than a typical local, just because it does connect from Monroe, which is a collector, up to King, an arterial road, but there's no specific
Kenneth,
plan to modify the routing of traffic that I'm aware of.
Mr. Kent, is 70th a collector or a connector? Just wanted to make sure I get my terms right.
Connector.
Thank you.
And yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so just to summarize, the flow goes through Monroe and out to 82nd, and then you'll basically just be where other than the capital project, the improvements will be on the proposed public roads and private streets. Okay, so give me a second here. Neil. Oh. Mr. Ingersoll, Mr. Turner addressed those items that couldn't be that weren't part of the approval criteria, so I didn't need to go over there. I think you talked about maybe the utilities being exacerbated. Now the utility districts, Water Environmental Services and Clackamas River Water, have provided documentation that there's capacity to serve for stormwater, drinking water, and sewer. So I'd like to note that. And then, yeah, and just to, again, the high density is basically it's the state requirement. All cities over a certain size have to apply these kind of higher density standards in the urban low density residential zone. So it's kind of the case across the board here. So that is all my questions or my responses to the public testimony. Is it appropriate, Mr. Turner, to talk about one of Mr. Goodell's questions that he had on McEachron?
Sure. Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so that's a good question.
I'm sorry, what was his question?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah,
That's
let's go back. So the question, he wanted some clarification on how 72nd Avenue interacts with this Southeast McEachron, I think it is, that connects further south to the site. And there was some clarification on where and what was going to be required for improvements, which Ken and I can clarify. So Southeast 72nd will be dedicated to the south end of the subject property. There was some road naming I guess, inconsistency where this is 72nd, but at the same line, you have Southeast McEachron that goes to the south. I can bring up another map that actually, I think I have it. That kind of shows it kind of comes on down here. So McEachron A will need to be renamed to Southeast 72nd so that we have the proper naming convention again. But and that's not a ZDO criteria, that's an addressing requirement. But bottom line is there'll be no requirements to construct 72nd beyond the subject property, which is the requirement of the subdivision. So, but if you keep the continuation of 72nd, if you follow my cursor here, we'll go down to just let me look at the street. Let me just go ahead and show you here. Make it a little easier.
And while you're looking, the plan is when the abutting property to the south redevelops, that road would be extended. The county has no plan to extend it now.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that's 100% correct. So
there's Linwood. I'm spelling it wrong. I couldn't find it on Google Maps.
So you could see McEachron and 72nd, they're colliding. So
Yeah.
staff will have to rename that McEachron likely to 72nd to stay consistent with road naming. I think there may be one property addressed on McEachron. It's all undeveloped land. And then, yeah, to your point, Mr. Turner, the development stops at the subject property and it's just whatever's needed to construct the road. And it may very well be developed in the future. These parcels to the south are not developed. So that may be coming, but nothing proposed as of yet.
Okay, so when and if they do, then McEachron 172nd would be extended.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, in fact, I think and I also think there's some right of way there's already right of way therein.
Right. It would be,
yeah,
the improvements would be extended.
the improvements. Yes. So those are my responses.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Blessing. Mr. Kent, if you want to add anything, or do you think Mr. Blessing covered it, that's fine. Just want to give you a chance.
I can add some more because there were some other questions. There's questions on broader traffic and transportation plans and because again, that's not specifically my role because I'm in the development engineering side representing the engineering overall, but there's other staff involved kind of in the broader transportation side. Right now, the county's starting the process of updating our transportation system plan. And that's where a lot of these projects like the Monroe pedestrian improvement project start and they get planned and as far as deciding what roads need to be improved and if there's existing safety issues and traffic issues, those are usually worked out in the transportation system plan. That might be every 5 or 10 years that's updated. So that's starting the process. So as far as any other plans for addressing traffic that are out there, that's something that would be, it's going to be looked at in the next couple of years. But as far as, address, I think there were some concerns about how 72nd functions and can handle the traffic. The Monroe project will be making some improvements with curbs and sidewalk. It may be better defining that roadway because right now that is serving as somewhat of a through movement. Monroe, 72nd, Thompson carries a fair amount of traffic. And so these improvements will address some of that. So there is some public potential involvement if interested in the transportation system plan. We'd be looking at, what kind of changes will happen in the broader transportation network and the county's plan for that, but that would be coming up in the next few years. I know there's a question on Jack Street with the parking. Although this development, we can't require anything specific on Jack Street itself. The neighbors could work with our traffic safety section on potential parking restrictions. I mean, there are certain cases where the county can post no parking in some cases if there's issues. I mean, the current width of Jack Street is, if you would technically should have parking only on one side. So that sometimes is a challenge in the neighborhood if you're going to designate one side of the street, no parking, and another side available. That's an opportunity at least to discuss it with our transportation safety staff to see if there's any parking restrictions that could be applied or if that's desired. For the project itself, there will be some parking on the private street, but that's going to be the public street A loop within the site. But it may be limited somewhat depending on the driveway orientation. I think the applicant had, one of their drawings had some driveway plans, but depends on how close the driveways are as whether there'll be parking, but the width of the road would allow parking on both sides of street A. Let's see. I think those are the main items I have. Any other questions?
Real quick, I'd ask everybody to mute themselves who's not currently speaking. We're getting a little background speaking. Mr. Kent, if people want to get involved in the future planning, the capital improvement project planning, could they contact you and you could direct them to appropriate staff or websites, whatever, how they can get involved?
Yes, I think that's fine. I could probably find out who to contact, let them know.
I figured you'd be the best point of contact, you or Mr. Blessing, so you can find somebody. Thank you. Kathleen has a hand raised. Can we promote her?
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you for allowing me to ask another question.
Can I get your name again?
Yes, my name is Kathleen McNeil, McNeal. I live at 6900 Southeast Queen Road. My questions were specific to, of course, the quality of life, but the traffic. And Mr. Blessing, I think you just stated that there were no improvements and you didn't think that there was going to be any impact to 72nd? Okay, because I think that maybe we need clarification. There will be much impact to 72nd between King Road and Monroe. And
I understand, Ms. McNeil, and that's Ms. McNeil. Ms. McNeil, I'm trying to answer your question. That's addressed in the traffic impact analysis.
Yeah, Exhibit 2A, I'm waiting for that. But specific to what I've just listened to in the discussion going on, I heard that there were I thought it was Mr. Blessing that said there would be no impact to 72nd. And my question originally was also, what about the link where 72nd meets King Road? There's no light, it's a blind corner, and there have been issues. Now, if I have to go back and read Exhibit 2A once I receive that, I will gladly do so, but I was hoping it could be addressed in this meeting. The other thing I want to have addressed is Mr. Kent was mentioning that there would be that there would be improvements subject to the Monroe Street improvement, but that Monroe Street improvement, I don't believe would have any effect on 72nd and its length between King Road and Monroe. So again, I'm focusing right now a little bit on 72nd because that's important and I don't believe it's been addressed. And then my other item that I don't believe was addressed was where Monroe crosses Linwood. And I'm glad you just found Linwood on the map, Mr. Turner. But that
I was aware of the streets around it, but I was trying to figure out where they
and by the way, it's 72nd, not 172nd. That intersection, because it had so many issues, is now completely blocked. You can't cross.
I understand.
Monroe. So if you guys could just take a couple of moments. We have not seen the report, the staff report, and Exhibit 2A. So I'm pleading with you to give me some colloquial on it. What's going to happen at the corner of 72nd and King Road? That's an issue. It's been an issue, and I want to know, has the county made any determination for an improvement there, and how that area is going to be affected by all of these cars and the increased traffic?
Okay.
And that's it.
Thank you, Ms. McNeil.
Please. Just
I'm going to hold off on additional public testimony for the moment because I want to give the applicant the chance to respond. They may address some of the issues that were raised. Generally, I close the testimony to public testimony, but after the staff and applicants' response, but because so many people missed the introductory, some of those issues may have been addressed and they didn't get to hear it. So I am going to reopen it to public testimony after the applicant's response. I will ask people not to reiterate issues of what you've already raised. But if their responses raise additional questions, concerns, I will open it for that purpose. But please don't repeat things you've already raised. I will consider them in my decision. So with that, Mr. Goodall, does you or your other staff want to address the concerns that have been raised?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Turner. I'm going to cover a variety of topics here. And so I mentioned there was other members of our team here from Pastor Mobley and our civil engineer here. So if you guys have anything to add after I speak, then please do. I want to thank you, Ben, for clarifying the condition of approval XII and the McEachern right-of-way. Seems like a lot of the streets here are kind of the names are problematic and they're named two different things. But if we could have that condition clarified, and we can deal with this in the open record to say to the site's southern property line, because it's just not entirely clear what McEachern right-of-way is and whatnot, because it could be read as something different. So that's all I had to say about that, other than thanks for the clarification, and thank you, Ken, for clarifying a number of the transportation related issues, especially the TSP update process. I think that's where people really should get involved. Sometimes by the time an application hits, many of the issues have been decided and people don't realize that. And it's getting involved early on with the transportation planning studies that really are more helpful. But be that as it may, I just wanted to capture a couple different thoughts. As it was mentioned, I think Ben mentioned, or maybe it was you, Mr. Turner, it's understandable that the neighbors have thoughts on the density of the project and townhouses being allowed in a area that was formerly only single family detached homes. And I think that many of the jurisdictions that we're working in struggle with that. But the county, back, I think it was 2019, this law was passed. They wanted to provide the quote unquote missing middle, the types of housing that enough of it wasn't being created. Duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, and townhouses were included in that bill. And the county had an extensive public process by which they incorporated those concepts and the requirements into their ZDO. And so our job here as a consultant is to design a project, to put together a application that meets the approval criteria within the ZDO and other applicable documents that the county has. And I believe based on the staff report, the comments provided by the various service provider letters or service providers, that's exactly what you have before you here. A couple of thoughts on the different comments was mentioned, I guess, heat reduction and wildlife habitat, and it was more or less a comment on open space, I think, is really what was being heard. And so and Ben touched on this, and what I figured I would say is that on this project, you've got 2 open space areas and 2 stormwater management facilities, which are going to be basically landscaped areas, green space, for lack of a better word. And that's total 7.3 acres, which is 38% of the site. So it's a pretty big chunk. And that doesn't count people's backyards or front yards or, planter strips along streets and stuff like that. So it's not a concrete island that's before you. Second was regarding infrastructure, and I think Ken and Ben spoke to that well. But we've been interacting with all the various service providers for a very long time: Clackamas River Water, Water Environment Services, County DTD. So we've in the record, you have recommendations from each one of those groups, all the service providers, that there's capacity to service this project. Let's see. A lot of comments on Jack Street, and one thing that people ought to know is that we were thoughtful of the Jack Street stub into the property, in that the county development or ZDO encourages through streets, and that, I believe, is probably the preference of staff, is to based on what the ZDO says, is that continue the Jack Street into the site. We recognized early on that probably, based on our experience, that wouldn't be a real popular idea. So we decided not to do that, but instead to have a pedestrian connection with an emergency access connection to Jack Street to the east. Yeah, I guess that was our thought, and to the extent we had to apply for a design modification and get approval from the county engineering staff to do that. And so we've done that already, and the idea was to lessen impacts to that street and those neighbors in particular. Let's see. Going over my notes, my apologies. I think it was Miss Avila, and I apologize if I mispronounced your name, had some comments about privacy. And one thing I wanted to add there again is that our site, the project site where it abuts her property, is going to be sitting below, with the grading plan in the project, it's going to be sitting below her property. So people won't be necessarily peering in. The grade will be lower in that area. And that's shown on Exhibit 2 plan sheet. I think it's Exhibit 2, page 29 of our application. A lot of comments regarding traffic, and it was mentioned that we included a traffic study in our application, which we did, which is the county requirement. And that traffic study was scoped with all the appropriate parties, primarily Clackamas County DTD. And it analyzed 13 different intersections in the area, including 70th and Monroe and 70th and King, and a variety of other locations that were talked about, and found those intersections to operate safely currently and with capacity to accommodate this project. And that was prepared by Lancaster Mobley. Daniel Stump here is a registered professional engineer, and he prepared this study along with another engineer with Lancaster Mobley. Let's see. There was a lot of talk about the county project, the Monroe Street project, and we coordinated very carefully with the development agency to make sure that our design would match into their design. It's more typical to have an existing condition that you're designing to, right? In this case, you've got an existing condition and then a future condition, which is the road project, and then we're making our project match into that. So that our project engineer, John here, spent a lot of time coordinating with county staff to make sure that our project and the county projects blended and matched. So I wanted to make sure everybody was aware of that. I mentioned some of the intersections that the traffic impact study covered. It also covered 72nd Avenue and Monroe and 72nd and Thompson. So those were all looked at. I guess the last thing, and Ben spoke to this, is, with respect to police coverage and school capacity, we do a lot of consulting work for those types of agencies as well. And they look at the population projections ahead of time and adjust their staffing and their school capacity on an as needed basis regularly. So they're not wanting to get caught not having capacity for students or having too much capacity. Although Ben mentioned it's not an approval criteria, it's something that is thought of outside of this process. There's a lot of things that go on outside of the land use process, and that's just one of them. So it's not something that's just not an approval criteria and not thought of. It is, but just not part of this land use process. Let's see. I think that's all I had, unless John, you have something to say, or Daniel. Thank you very much.
I'm okay.
Thank you.
Oh, I can follow up a little bit more on the applicant's side. So this is actually Daniel Stump with Lancaster Mobley. Last name is spelled STUMPF, and my address is 300 West 15th Street, Vancouver, Washington 98660. Apologies for the naming of myself on the screen. I had to borrow a link from the AKS crew.
Okay,
But yeah, I just wanted to thank Ken and Ben. They pretty much covered all the comments that were mentioned for the most part, and then also Chris Goodell. I just want to expand a little bit on some of the items that Chris had mentioned with regard to the safety analysis. So the analysis that we took a look at was reviewing crash history, available crash history that was provided by ODOT, and we did find that the crash rates at these intersections, they're well below the thresholds of what would be considered an unsafe intersection. And I'd also like to mention that all the crashes that did occur that were reported and provided by ODOT, they were generally low severity or no injury crashes. No high severity or fatal crashes had occurred in the area. So it was concluded that the transportation system is relatively safe. Same with the capacity analysis, looking at intersection operation. All intersections operated well within acceptable agency standards, so no mitigation was recommended for capacity purposes. There was one comment that was brought up by Kathleen McNeil regarding a blind turn at the intersection of 70th and King. I can't really expand too much on that issue. I will note just because it wasn't included, that level of analysis was not required as part of the traffic study. I can mention though that the intersection is designed in such a way where 70th Avenue is located on the outside of a horizontal vertex curve. So sight distances should be well available at that location. I do note though that there is some overgrown foliage at the southwest quadrant of that intersection that's located within the public right of way. If there is truly a buy-in curve that's maybe related to that, that might be an item that Public Works could take a look at, just making sure those that foliage is cut down and well maintained. But otherwise, that should conclude my comments.
What is a horizontal vertex curve?
Oh, just a turn in the road, the vertex of that horizontal
The
curve.
angle at which that
Yeah.
70th intersects King.
Correct. Yeah.
King is curved there. Okay. I kind of understand what you mean. I should use that term. I wanted to make sure everybody understood what we're talking about.
Okay, sounds good.
And just for the general public to he noted that let me back up. The county has adopted level of service standards for intersections, which go from A to F. Anything that's a level of service D or better is considered adequate. So according to the traffic impact analysis, all of the intersections affected by this development will continue to operate with level of service D or better with the additional traffic from this development. So it meets the county standard that have been adopted by the board. Is that generally correct?
Generally, the county actually has a VC ratio standard
volume to capacity.
Of volume to capacity, correct. Okay. And so we are well within those standards.
And that means that the road has a certain expected capacity, it can carry so many trips, and is it 0.9, 90%?
It was 0.99 for the first hour. But Ben
is that
and
what the
Ken,
standard is?
Correct, but Ben and Ken can
Okay.
correct me if I'm incorrect on that.
Okay, but essentially, in using that standard, there is sufficient capacity at those intersections to meet the county's adopted standard for the capacity of the intersection. So, thank you. Anything further from the applicant? Okay, I'm going to go back to public testimony. I'll give staff and the applicant the final word to respond. And as I noted, I'm going to hold the record open. But again, please don't reiterate the issues you've already raised, but if the testimony has raised additional questions or need clarification, I'll let the public respond. Mr. Ingersoll, you're first on my list.
Yes, can I be heard?
Yep.
Great. Sean Ingersoll. I live at 6905 Southeast Jack Road, Milwaukee, Oregon, 97222.
And we just for everybody, we don't need addresses again. If you already testified, we just maybe you can state your name just so we know who's speaking. If this is just a recording, if somebody listens to it, go ahead, Mr. Ingersoll.
Okay. Just a few notes. I know Kathleen McNeil had been using 72nd and King in her follow-up question moments ago. she did mean 70th Avenue, which
Okay.
is just being discussed as that.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, it's that blind corner where we have seen over the years many accidents and people going through people's backyards, and that kind of thing quite frequently. I also wanted to, I don't know if it was addressed by Ken, but in my original testimony, I had brought up the intersection of Linwood and Monroe. I have not had time to really dive into the Monroe Improvement Project. But as it currently stands, that intersection, like I said, you cannot cross Monroe. And so as a result, traffic is snaking through the neighborhood as a result, because it's a pretty common thoroughfare for the community. So we are dealing with that on our quieter streets. I also, for Ben, I did try to find the staff report online and I was not able to. So I'm not entirely sure what area has been
I'll ask him to
considered.
clarify, and
But
if
yeah,
we
but
can just send out an email.
I do think that, south of King, east of Linwood, west of 74th, north of Thompson should all be considered. I don't know if that is, just based on living here. I know on paper things are going to be one way, but in reality they're different. I don't know if any of you have had the opportunity to visit the area or pull it up on a Google map. But paper is different than reality. And sometimes it actually makes more sense to expand the scope of a project. Kind of going back to the note that a few raised, let's see. I believe Kyle and Katrina both were concerned with roadway parking. I know that the consultant addressed the Jack Road walkthrough. I looked at the proposal in terms of density, and I just don't see how it's feasible to think that people will not be using our side streets to park. I feel like that is perhaps an oversight and something that should be strongly considered. I think it's highly inappropriate to put a development in that cannot support the residents that will be living within that area.
I understand that, Mr. Ingersoll, but the county code adopts minimum parking requirements they have to provide on each lot. If those are met, I have to find is adequate. The code doesn't require minimum on-street parking or other additional parking. It is a balance of, it's a balancing act between you want enough parking, but you want to reduce pervious surfaces, et cetera, pavement. You want to.
Well, I think the issue
that's a policy that's struck by the Board of Commissioners. So
yeah,
if it meets the standard, I have to adopt it.
It's not about increasing impervious surfaces to afford that. The issue is there are so many driveways that people literally cannot park on the street. So they will be. And so keeping with that, I just want to note again, on paper, maybe you guys are following the law to the T, but in reality, and the people that have to live with the consequences, yes, maybe you are following the rules and the regulation, but like we are the families, we are the homes that are going to be dealing with the consequences of this plan. So I would also like to note that there are many working families in this area who do not have the luxury to attend hearings like this. I am only able to attend this because I am unemployed. So as I believe Chelsea pointed out, no one supports this proposal. And to sit there and say, well, they're following the rules, there's nothing I can do, I think is just very inappropriate, and you're not going to have to live here to deal with the consequences. So,
Mr. Ingersoll, if I denied it based on those public concerns, whether that it met the code, but I denied it based on those concerns, it would get appealed to the Land Use Board of Appeals. It would be reversed by the Land Use Board of Appeals, and we'd be back here, and the county would likely have to pay the applicant's attorney fees. So I understand, but I cannot consider general objections and concerned public objections anybody's
Sure.
objections. If
Sure.
it meets the criteria, it has to be approved. It's a
Okay.
policy,
Well-
the criteria are policy choice by the board, so.
Great.
If you want to
Okay, I
change the
do
law-
want to draw attention to, and I know that like, we're just a working family. We're not, we're not making laws. We're not, we're not enmeshed in that. But I know you're saying Oregon has given new directives towards addressing the housing crisis. Again, I just want to draw attention to a Clackamas County zoning and development ordinance I found. Granted, this is old. I think that it is, kind of relates to this project. It is 301.01. The last text revision was May 2nd, 2003. The purpose. This section implements the policy of the comprehensive plan for existing and future low-density residential areas, which include A, provide and protect residential land for families who desire to live in low-density environment. B, protect the character of existing low-density neighborhoods. And there's C, which says provide for development with carrying capacity of hillsides and environmentally sensitive areas. I don't even know what that means, but I don't know, maybe it's applicable. But and I think I had one more note. Sorry, just looking through.
That's okay.
I've been jotting a lot down. Okay, I seem to be almost done, but I would encourage everyone who does not live here and will not have to deal with, this proposal and what it does to the community, to pull it up on Google Maps sometime, look from Linwood to 74th, King to Thompson. If there's no improvements on 74th, like that's a real concern. Like I just pull it up, look at it. I just do not understand how the county can reasonably think that this area can support this many houses, this many people.
I understand, Mr. Ingersoll, that has been clearly raised and there's no need to repeat it, and I will consider those concerns.
Okay, so I guess in closing, I just want to state that I oppose the proposal.
Okay, thank you,
Thank-
Mr. Ingersoll. Ms. Lawrence? You're mute. Oh, yeah, there we go. You're muted, Ms. Lawrence.
Okay,
There
can
we
you
go.
hear me?
Yep.
Yes. Okay, I'm Gretchen Lawrence. I live at 7407 Southeast Jack Road. And I am personally kind of shocked that you all did not look at 74th in the planning of traffic. This is going to be when people are
The
leaving.
traffic
this-
analysis did consider 74th. The applicant's traffic analysis.
Okay, because it said that you only did Monroe, 70th, and 72nd.
I think that's where the county's capital improvement project is going. But I believe the traffic impact analysis, it considered that intersection. I'll ask the applicant to confirm that, but that's my understanding.
Okay, I would like that to be confirmed because I do not understand how there could be no improvement on 74th, considering it is the main thoroughway to the school. And so there would be people who would be coming through either that passway on that stub on Jack into the cul-de-sac. People would be coming that way to take their children to school. There would be people coming down Monroe to access Jack to take their children to school, but also all the people who would be coming out of Monroe to go to 205 or 82nd. They will all be going up 74th. So I just don't understand how they're thought no improvements were going to be needed for safety of pedestrians on 74th.
The issue is whether it meets the standards for level of service and capacity. I guess, sorry, wrong jurisdiction, is capacity, volume to capacity. The fact that there are no sidewalks is not uncommon in the urban area. There are a lot of streets like that. streets sidewalks are provided over time as development occurs. It is.
Yeah, but that's 170 houses that you're
I
putting
understand.
additional
But that's not
traffic
something the
on.
county requires, and they can't, because the county, in order to require the applicant to spend money, it has to demonstrate that cost is, that this development is creating or exacerbating the need for that improvement, which it clearly is. But it
Yes.
also has to prove that the cost is proportional to the impact of the development. So they're generating a lot of additional traffic, but there's a lot of traffic out there now. There are other developments in the area that are also generating traffic. So this applicant can't be required to fix all the existing offsite concerns. It has to, everybody has to pay for it. This development, future developments, and existing residents. It's a constitutional, that the U.S. Supreme Court has ruled that county has to prove that it's roughly proportional, is the term the court used, to the cost is roughly proportional to the impact. And making the applicant build a significant chunk of offsite sidewalk generally isn't significant or roughly proportional. So that's the standard the county has to prove to demonstrate and meet. But I understand the concern, but that's the constraint that the county's under.
Okay, well, I would just like to, if somebody could send out or something, the part that they did do a traffic study on 74th, because I don't believe that it was studied.
Yeah,
So I would
I'll
like
ask
to
the
see that.
applicant.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Chelsea? Sorry, I don't have a last name on my screen. Okay, looks like Chelsea's lowered her hand. Ms. Lawrence, can you click on the raise your hand button? Oh, Chelsea's back. And Ms. Lawrence, can you click on your raise your hand so it goes away?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, so.
Can I get your last name?
Yes, Chelsea Avila, AV like Victor,
Thank you.
ILA.
Yep.
So he did touch a little bit on the fence. I would like to know if they've come out and look at the fence, because again, you'd still be able to see into my property. I would also, another question that came up as he was speaking is the hill. Once they start digging over there, how are they going to reinforce my property with the hill that goes down into their property? Also, to touch on this 74th, when they were doing this study, I would also like to know, did they do the study when school was letting out? Because like I've said, my children have almost been hit going to the bus stop. And so I would like to know if they did the study when the elementary school was letting out. And to touch on Kent, when he talked about we could go and get them to put parking only on one side of the street, that's kind of hurting us.
Yeah, I understand, but
that would hurt us as 5 neighbors to only be allowed to park on one side of the street. And then it would potentially not even give us room to park our own vehicles because of this new said development.
The county, I don't know if this jurisdiction has that, but some jurisdictions have a neighborhood parking program where there has to be a permit parking. That's something you can contact the county about outside this hearing. It's not something this applicant has to fix, but
of course. And then,
that may be an option. So
of course. And then, with this said breezeway, they are going to be giving those people privacy for their houses. And I know with messaging back and forth with Ben, there is no laws that they have to give us privacy. I would like to know why there's
the applicant may choose to put in a fence as part of their development, or future homeowners may do so. And you're
then
entitled.
I guess another thing, when they have to put in this breezeway, they will be ripping up my yard, and the main water line is in my front yard. What are they going to be doing about that?
They'll have to accommodate and deal with the water line. They may be, I don't know how they're getting water to the site, but they may be connecting to it, but they'll have to deal with it, and it'll be through the engineering design process.
And then will they be coming out to speak with us of how they will be tearing that up, or how will that happen?
If it's on your property, it's likely in an
property.
easement. Then there must be an easement, or there's some, they will have some significant issues. But they have, the county, the applicant, whoever's doing construction, needed construction in the area has the right to access the easement for that purpose.
When I purchased the property, there was no set easement in my documents of that.
Okay, that's something you may need to consult with some legal counsel to advise you, but if it's on your property and there's no easement, you may have the right to prohibit them from accessing it. But that's not something I can address in this proceeding. That's a private issue.
Okay, I will contact somebody on that. Thank you.
You're welcome. Was that all you wanted to add?
Yes, that's all I wanted to add.
Thank you. If you'll click on the raise your hand button and mute yourself, I'd appreciate it. Mr. Linneman?
Hi, this is Kyle Lindeman again. There's another thing I forgot to ask about. I know one of the requirements, or one of the things I saw in the document, was access to transportation. I know currently there is no crossing of King Road between Bell and 82nd. I see a lot of people playing leapfrog to get to Monroe Park, to get over to the bus stop, to go anywhere. You know, if you live in our neighborhood.
Mr. Lindeman, that's an offsite improvement that this applicant can't be required to fix. It's something you need to raise with the county. The county could go out and put something in if it decided that it was needed and the funds were available, but it's not something I can make this applicant do.
Okay, just wait for people to get hit then. Cool.
Well, contact the county, and the county may not be aware of the need for it, and it may be that it is very needed. And if you know, squeaky wheel gets the grease, so to speak. So contact the county, contact the Board of Commissioners. It's an existing problem. The applicant can't be required to fix all existing problems, but the county wants to know about them and can make efforts to fix it. Matt, sorry, I don't have a last name.
Hi, it's Matt Cabral.
Can you spell your last name, sir?
C-A-B-R-A-L.
E as in elephant, A-B?
C-A-B-R-A-L.
Thank you. That makes, that sounds more, go ahead, Mr. Cabral.
So I'm at 10966 Southeast 72nd Avenue, Milwaukee, Oregon, 97222. So I had a question regarding the junctions between Monroe on 72nd to Thompson. As how is that's going to be affected regarding the project? Because I saw that the options were given that either the driveways were either going to be facing 72nd or they were either going to be facing Monroe.
Okay, I can answer that real quick if you'd like.
Yeah, my apologies if these have been answered before.
Yeah, given the technical issues we had this morning, I'm happy to reiterate that that the county has that Monroe project that they're putting in. There is a multi-use trail on would be the west side of 72nd is planned. So the county doesn't want driveways going across the multi-use trail. So the applicant is working with the county's agency that's doing that project to, let me back up a minute. Given the classification of 72nd as a local road, the applicant has the right to put driveways out. The county can't prohibit it. But there's the applicant understands the county's concerns and doesn't want to make things, you know, create a problem there. So they're working with the agency that's building that to, if they can come to an agreement, the applicant would put an alley behind those lots. Print's a little too small, but the ones on the west side of 72nd between Monroe and Thompson, they put an alley access in there, so there would be no driveways going across that multi-use path.
Right, and I saw that was listed as option 2, and that would connect to Monroe. Right. But that leads me into a question as far as like the traffic situation. Because I'm not, unfortunately, like I said, I missed the beginning of the meeting, so I'm not sure if anybody's brought this up yet. I know that Thompson and 72nd have been a traffic problem for 30 plus years. Numerous crashes, speeding through the area, things of that nature. As well as what are we expecting as far as, you know, relationship to types of vehicles that are going to be permitted in the roadways?
It's a public
Is
road.
there a restriction? Well,
No,
right. It's so I keep getting like I've talked to the county, I've talked to code enforcement, I've talked to traffic, and we've been getting mixed results and signals and information as to what types of vehicle traffic are going to be permitted and what types are going to be prohibited. For instance, we've had some tell us that freight vehicle traffic such as 18-wheelers are not permitted or not going to be permitted, and then we've had others
Okay.
tell us that they're perfectly allowable,
okay.
even though our
If-
roadways are not designed
If the staff
for
that's here can
18-wheeler
address
traffic.
that, I'll let them, but it's not something that's relevant to this project. So construction vehicles are going to have to access this site to build this development, but otherwise they're not going to generate.
Right,
it.
I understand construction
So
vehicles.
I totally understand your
to
concern,
access.
but it's not something this applicant and these staff may be able to address, but they, I'm sure, could direct you to somebody who might be able to address your concern.
I would
or at least
appreciate that
respond to your
because
question.
we've been really short on getting clarification on that type of thing.
Yeah, I totally understand, but I can't.
No, I
Staff that are here
understand
may
that
not be able to either. So it's an understandable concern, and if they can at least direct you to who could, great. But it's not something that's relevant to this.
And I
this project.
understand that the applicant's not required to like put signage or things like that to make
Yeah,
roadway
yeah.
restrictions for that. I understand that because that's a county road.
Yeah.
But the traffic issue is definitely one of my concerns. Because I am on what's essentially referred to as a blind corner. And so for us, when we get vehicles coming around with the increased traffic that's going to occur due to this, traffic mitigation and the impact studies for it is something that really interests us because we've had a number of times where people would just come through the area, even just in the current density that it's at. We've had people come through the area and nearly hit us just pulling in and out of our driveways. And so you were saying it's an extra 170 houses?
I think so. 169 lots.
Okay. So that would be anywhere between 169 to 350 additional vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
Approximately.
And if it meets the volume capacity at the count, if there's adequate capacity to accommodate those trips based on the standards adopted by this board, I have to approve it.
Right, and
Any
so
increase in traffic is going to increase, the risk of it. But that's one of the hazards of living in a developing urban area. It's if it meets the standard, it has to be approved. It will be different. There will be more traffic, but they're also building additional improvements.
Right, and I understand that things get improved and added and things like that. I understand that. Okay. My other issue is like, what is the current classification for, or what is going to be the classification for Monroe and 72nd as far as type of road?
Yeah,
is it
Monroe
listed as
a local street? Excuse me, 72nd's a local street. Monroe is a somewhat higher classification. I don't recall off the top of my head, but staff could address that.
So I know there's the three classifications that I'm aware of, which is the local subsidiary road and then arterial road.
Well, there's local, there's connector, there's collector, and there's arterial, and there may be other ones in between, but they all have standards, and the roads that are abutting this site have to be.
So that I guess that's kind of my question then is like, what is Monroe currently listed as?
Yeah, I'm going to ask staff to address that.
Okay, because in previous paperwork I've received, it says Monroe is listed as an arterial road.
It may be.
It's right, but the current design of Monroe and even with the existing housing, we're not technically an arterial road anymore because of that isolation there at Linwood that cut off Monroe.
Okay, and that's something you can address with transportation staff outside of this hearing. It might be appropriate to change the classification of that road given the closure at Linwood, but it's out beyond the scope of this
Well,
project.
that comes to the next question is like, if the road classification does or does not affect the applicant's proposal.
Well, the applicant is subject to the criteria that were in effect when the application was filed. They have to build it to current standard. So if it's changed in the future, unless that change occurs before they start building, they have to build the current standard.
Okay,
So-
and then some others had mentioned it too, that there was the traffic analysis for both 72nd and 74th.
Mhm.
Was there one done for 72nd?
That I don't know off the top of my head, but staff, the applicant can address that. And if it was or wasn't, it's something I'll have to consider in my decision.
If it was, I would really appreciate a copy of that report.
Yep. And anybody who wants to can contact Mr. Blessing to get a copy of the staff report, transportation, or any of the other evidence in the record, or they can provide you a link to how you can access it online.
I would appreciate that.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Mr. Ingersoll, last time.
Thank you, Joe. No, I just wanted to just to respond real quick to a common answer I'm hearing, which is that the developer can't be made to make these improvements outside of the scope of this project. I think we all understand that. I don't think that's what we're asking or expecting. I think the concern, especially over traffic and safety, is that it makes most logical sense to address these issues before they get worse. So, you know,
Yes.
concerns over 74th and King, concerns over Lot Whitcomb School.
I understand, Mr. Ingersoll. I just wanted to clarify that what the scope of what the applicant be required to do. The issue is whether it meets the standards, and that's what I'll have to decide. And I have a lot of testimony and evidence that I will consider in making my decision. But
Okay, I just wanted to
issues have been clearly raised.
clarify that that was not at all. I don't think that's anyone's expecting that the developer has to address those, but rather the county would have to address those. And it makes most sense to do that before we, you know, start adding higher density housing. That's all.
I
Thank you.
understand. And that's something you can raise with transportation staff, the planning, long-term planning with transportation, and Mr. Kent can direct you to that staff and also the Board of Commissioners. They're your elected officials and they have a incentive to address public's concerns. But it's in this proceeding is not the process for addressing those. It's outside the scope of this project.
No one was saying that.
Okay. Katie hosts iPhone again. I can say.
Hi, this is Katrina Otness again. I live on 72nd. I don't know if this is valid or not, but I don't know if you are aware there are a den of coyotes that live
It's not.
behind the greenhouse. Okay, I didn't know if that was.
Yeah,
Okay.
I appreciate
All right.
that's been raised in the written testimony, but it's
Oh,
not
okay.
it's
Thank
not
you.
a protected species. Okay. Mr. Blessing, anything further from county or Mr. Kent?
I just have a couple of quick responses. Where was it? Oh, yeah, Miss Avila, get these on my notes here. Oh, yes, the issue about possible easements and or encroachments onto subject property. So I just point out that and the applicant can speak more to this, and I'll just share the screen again if appropriate. If that's okay. So the public road right of way of Jack Road is here at Stub. So that means the eastern property line, it basically shares a boundary with the right of way. So if there are encroachments into the subject property or to the south or the north, as Mr. Turner said, that have to be addressed with the surveying department. And obviously their encroachments have maybe would have to be resolved potentially civilly, if I'm speaking correctly. But for the public road right away, this segment here does connect to the property line. So I just wanted to highlight that as well. And I think basically everything else regarding the traffic, probably be addressed by the, traffic engineer or the applicant, possibly Ken. And, I think that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Blessing. Mr. Kent, do you want to respond or do you want to leave it to the applicant?
It might be best to the applicant. I mean, I'll just note with a traffic study, a lot of that is coordinated with county traffic engineers as far as the scope. I've looked at the study myself. I mean, it's Thompson and 72nd and 70th and Monroe and 70th King were analyzed. I mean, I'm not initially seeing 74th specifically analyzed, but part of that decision is usually based on where the trips are estimated to travel and looking at, you know, which intersections will receive the most traffic from any particular development. But the applicant may have more information on that.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Goodell or Mr. Stump?
So this is Daniel Stump with Lancaster Mobley. I can speak on regarding the traffic study. Specifically on the intersection of 74th at King, that was not included as part of the analysis for the traffic study itself. Like Ken had mentioned, we had scoped it with the county and it was determined that our impacts there would not be significant relative to, say, the intersection of King at 70th Avenue. But I would like to just point out that we had done analysis at 70th and King, Cook and King actually as well in an addendum. Both studies had shown that those intersections were operating well within acceptable capacity standards. I expect the same would happen at the intersection of 74th and King. And I'd also like to point out that specifically for the intersection of Cook and King, that intersection is expected to serve a significantly more higher level of traffic just because there's a lot more denser residential development or a lot more dwelling units that take access through that intersection versus 74th or 70th. Given that intersection operates fine, I don't see any reason why 74th wouldn't operate at that level or better.
Thank you, Mr. Stump. Mr. Goodell, anything else from the county? That's the applicant, sorry.
No,
Okay.
You mentioned earlier the open record period. I think we've gone round and round here enough. So anything that comes in after the first week, we'd like to be able to respond to, like you mentioned. Thank you.
Yeah, I figured you would. So what I'm going to do is hold it open for a total of 3 weeks to make sure everybody gets the chance to submit additional testimony. I'm going to hold it open for 1 week. There we go. Till May 30th, next Thursday, May 30th at 4 o'clock. Is that correct? Okay. So for anybody to submit additional new testimony and evidence, anything anybody submits has to be received by the county by 4 o'clock p.m. on May 30th, next Thursday. I'll hold it open for an additional week until June 6th for anybody to respond to whatever was submitted during the first week. So the second week is limited to responses of the issues and concerns raised during the first week. No new issues could be raised during the second week. And then until June 13th, third week, for the applicant alone to submit a final written argument without any new evidence. If the applicant chooses to, they can submit that early or waive it and ask me to close the record earlier. I will issue my decision within about 2 weeks after the close of the record, which would be at the most June 27th. I'll do my best to get it out within that 2-week period. I will send my decision to the county. The county will send it to parties of record. So anybody who has testified orally or in writing, or who does so during the open record period, will be sure and receive a copy of my decision. If you haven't testified and choose not to, you can ask and still want to see a copy of my decision, you can contact Mr. Blessing and ask to be added to the list to receive it. But that's what the process is. But to reiterate, anything that anybody wants to submit has to be physically received by the county by 4 o'clock on the relevant date. And that concludes our hearing. Thank you all. Have a good afternoon.